Welcome back, students, to the KCET lecture series and mock CET organized by AITM Bhatkal. Today, in this video, we will be discussing the part 2 of the most important chapter for the chemistry KCET examination that contains maximum weightage, that is coordination compounds. Before going into today's topics, let us brush up the topics that were discussed in the last video. So the topics that were discussed in the last video was the definition of the coordination compounds, okay, its constituents. So what are the different parts of the coordination compounds, as in coordination sphere and ionic sphere, etc. Then what are ligands? What are the specification for a substituent atom to say it as a ligand, and what are its types based on the number of active centers present in a ligand? Then, based on the charge acquired by the coordination sphere, we have discussed the types of complexes. Fourth one is the oxidation state. How to calculate the oxidation state of a given coordination complex. Next is the determination of a coordination sphere based on the type of ligand present. If it's a monodentate ligand, the number of ligand is equal to the coordination number. Then if it's a didentate ligand, into 2, so it goes like that. Next is IUPAC naming. Based on the set of rules set by the IUPAC standards, we will name a complex compound based on IUPAC norms. And finally, the isomerism. Okay, we have discussed two different isomerism. One is structural isomerism and one is stereoisomerism. In structural isomerism, 4 different types of isomers, and in stereo, we have discussed geometrical isomerism and optical isomerism. So, in today's video, we will be discussing the Werner's theory, which gives us idea regarding the primary valency and secondary valency of a compound. Valence bond theory, which will give us idea regarding the hybridization shape, inner outer orbital complex, high spin low spin complexes, and magnetism of a particular compound. Then crystal field theory for octahedral and tetrahedral complexes, which gives us idea regarding the degenerate crystal field splitting and also crystal field stabilization energy. Next, effective atomic number. If you know the atomic number, if you know the coordination number and oxidation state of a compound, how to calculate effective atomic number according to the Sidgwick theory. Next, factors affecting stability of a complex. If the two complex is given to you, how do you compare its stability as to how you will answer which compound is more stable compared to other one. So these are 6 topics we'll be discussing in today's video, and that will complete your coordination compound chapter. First, we'll move on to the Werner's theory of coordination compounds. So according to the Werner's theory, it gave us idea regarding 2 different valencies of a coordination compound. According to the Werner's theory, a particular coordination compound contains 2 different valency. One valency is said to be the primary valency, which is nothing but the oxidation state of a central metal atom. And the second valency is a secondary valency, which is nothing but the coordination number of a central metal atom. So how can the oxidation state be calculated? Just by deducing all the oxidation state of the individual atom of a coordination compound. And the coordination number is found out by the type of the ligand, right? If it's a monodentate ligand, then the number of ligand is your coordination number. If it's a bidentate ligand, it is into 2. If it's a tri, into 3, and the list continues. Now, you know that the oxidation state is always a positive number of a central metal atom. So metal will always possess the positive oxidation state. It should be satisfied by certain ions to make it neutral in the compound, right? So it is satisfied by the negative ions present in the compound. It may be in the ionic sphere or it may be the ligand. Whatever the negative ions that is present in the compound, that will satisfy by the oxidation state of the central metal atom. Now, coordination number, okay, it's a number of ligand present, right? So its valency is satisfied by the negative or neutral ligands, not by the ions, but only by the negative and the neutral ligands present in the compound. Only the thing that is present in the coordination sphere, not outside the coordination sphere. Whereas oxidation state is satisfied by the negative ions outside the coordination sphere also, but the coordination number or the secondary valency is satisfied only by the negative and neutral ligands present. So this is the idea given by the Werner's theory. For example, to calculate the primary and secondary valency, we'll take an example of K4FeCN6. What is primary valency? Primary valency is nothing but the oxidation state of ion. Okay. How to calculate the oxidation state of the ion here? K, its valency is +1. We will take it as 4K atom, right? +4. Fe will keep it as +X. Cn, you know that the oxidation state of individual cyanide ion is -1. So there are 6 cyanide ion minus 6. It is equal to 0. So when you simplify that, X is equal to 2. So the oxidation state or a primary valency of this compound is 2. According to the Werner's theory, it should satisfy by the negative ions. Which are the negative ions here? None other than the ligands. So out of 6 ligands, 2 cyanide ions ligand will satisfy the positive valency of the central metal atom. Then secondary valency. What type of ligand is CN? It is a monodentate ligand. So the number of ligand is itself its coordination number. So the coordination number of this compound is 6. So it should be satisfied by what? Negative ligands or the neutral ligands. So Cn minus is a negative ligand. So there are 6 ligands which will satisfy by the 6 coordination number of the compound. This is nothing but the Werner's theory. The type of question that you expect, okay, in this chapter, it is none other than to find the primary and secondary valency. So that is nothing but the Werner's theory of a coordination compounds. Next, we'll go to valence bond theory. What is this valence bond theory? Valence bond theory gives us the idea regarding the hybridization and shape of a compound. So when you see the compound, what is the hybridization that the central metal atom possesses, or what is the shape of a compound? It gives idea regarding hybridization and shape of a compound. Once you know what is the hybridization, okay, you can write the exact configuration. So it also gives you idea regarding the magnetic property, whether the compound is paramagnetic or it is diamagnetic. Next, based on the hybridization, the inner orbitals are involved or outer orbitals involved. Based on that idea, you can say whether the complex is an inner orbital complex or a outer orbital complex. Similarly, based on magnetism, you can discuss whether the complex is a high spin complex or a low spin complex. If it is paramagnetic, it will be a high spin complex. If it is diamagnetic, it will be a low spin complex. Now, before you just check what is the hybridization, what is the magnetic property, one main idea, whenever you see a compound, you should identify whether the ligand is a stronger ligand or weaker ligand. How to identify whether the given ligand is a stronger ligand or whether the given ligand is a weaker ligand? So, see, there is a, according to the strength, there is a chart given here, the strength of ligands. You can see on the weaker side of the ligands, there is halogens, that is iodine, bromine, chlorine, and fluorine. And in the stronger side, there are strong ligands like carbonyl, cyanide, nitro, En. One thing I'll specify you, no need to memorize this chart. Instead of that, just keep in mind the simpler chart, that is carbon donor ligands. Okay, the ligands that contain a carbon donor atom is way stronger than the nitrogen donor atoms. Again, nitrogen donor is way stronger than oxygen, which is way stronger than halogens. If you remember this chart, it is enough to identify whether the compound is a stronger ligand compound or a weak ligand compound. Let us cross check. So I said you carbon donor, it is more stronger than the nitrogen. In this chart, so carbonyl is the strongest one, right? Carbonyl means carbon donor ligand. Cyanide, carbon donor ligand. Then comes nitrogen ligand. So carbon donor is more stronger than nitrogen. NO2, nitrogen donor. En is nitrogen donor. NH3 is nitrogen donor. NCS is nitrogen donor. Then comes oxygen donor ligand. That is water, oxide, C2O42 minus, oxalate, OH minus, all these are oxygen donor. And last comes halogen, that is fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. So according to this chart, okay, we have cross-checked, right? The carbon donor ligand is stronger than nitrogen, which is stronger than oxygen, which is stronger than halogen. So if if you remember this chart, it is enough to identify in a compound whether the ligand is strong ligand or a weak ligand. Now, which are the weak field ligands according to this chart? Oxygen donor and halogen donors are the weak field ligands, but the carbon donors and the nitrogen donors are the strong field ligands. Okay, did you get that? Yes. Let's move on to the now. First, when you identify strong ligands and weak ligands, it will give you a clear picture regarding the hybridization, magnetic property, low spin, high spin complexes, and inner outer orbital. How is that? Just see. This is the quick points I have given you. If you identify that in a complex there are strong ligands, then usually the magnetic property of that complex will be diamagnetic property. Okay. If you see that the complex contains a strong ligand, then the magnetic property of that is it is diamagnetic. Why it will be diamagnetic? I'll tell you. In presence of strong ligand, the strength of the ligand will be so stronger that it will force the electron to get paired up. You know that when you will say the magnetic property as diamagnetic, when no electrons are free, it means all electrons are paired up and no single electron is free. Okay, it is not having one spin. The spins are cancelled out because they are paired up. So in presence of stronger ligands, electrons are forced to get paired up. That's why it possesses diamagnetic property. Okay, whenever you see the ligand in the complex, if it is a stronger ligand, you can write the magnetism as diamagnetic. There are few exceptions we will discuss. Okay. Next, magnetic property we have discussed. It is diamagnetic. Now coming to hybridization. First, you have to see what is the number of ligand present, whether there are 6 ligands or 4 ligands. If there are 6 ligands present, then the hybridization is always D2sp3. Okay. If 6 ligands are present, the hybridization is D2sp3. And if the 4 ligands are present, then the hybridization is DsP3. So in presence of stronger ligands, if 6 strong ligands are present, then the hybridization is D2sp3. And if 4 ligands are present, then the hybridization is DsP2. Next, since inner d orbitals are involved, it is said to be an inner orbital complex. So the complex in presence of stronger ligands, always inner d orbitals will be taking part in the hybridization. That's why it is said to be a inner orbital complex. Since it is diamagnetic, there is no spin there. That's why it is a low spin complex. So strong ligands will be diamagnetic. Hybridization will be D2sp3 or DsP2. It will be inner orbital complex and it will be a low spin complex. So these are the 4 points. Whenever you see strong ligand complex, this 4 points should come in your mind. Diamagnetic, D2sp3 hybridization, DsP2 hybridization, inner orbital complex and low spin complex. Then moving to the weaker ligands. In weak ligand, because the strength of the ligand is not so much, the electrons are not forced to pair up. That's why it will possess paramagnetic property. So whenever you see weak ligands in the complex, then you should remember that that complex is paramagnetic. There is one electron that is posing what? One individual spin. That's why it is said to be a paramagnetic. Now coming to hybridization. Now, if there are 6 ligands, then the hybridization is always sp3d2. Okay, what is the hybridization? It is sp3d2 if there is 6 ligands, and if there is 4 ligands, it is sp3. So in strong ligands, it is d2sp3 and dsp2, whereas in weak ligands, it is sp3d2 and sp3. You can see here in both this, s orbitals are involved in hybridization. S orbitals is always the outer orbitals. That's why it is said to be a outer orbital complex, since s orbitals are involved. And since it is weaker ligands, electrons do not pair up. And also it is a high spin complex. Why it is a high spin complex? Because there is always a single spin electron. It can spin on either ways. That's why it is a high spin complex. So whenever you see weak ligands, what are the points that should pop up in your mind? It is paramagnetic. It possesses sp3d2 hybridization in case of 6 ligands and sp3 hybridization in case of 4 ligands. Since s orbitals are involved, it is outer orbital complexes and electrons do not pair because the weak ligands are present, and also it's a high spin complexes. So when you heard strong ligands, 4 points should pop up, and when you listen to weak ligands, 4 points should pop up. Now we have discussed hybridization, magnetic property, outer orbital, inner orbital, high spin, low spin. Now the discussion is remaining is of the shape. Now, whether it is strong ligand or weak ligand, whenever you see there are 6 ligands present, only one shape is possible. That is octahedral. Okay, octahedral shape is possible in presence of 6 ligand. Whenever it is either it is strong ligand or weak ligand. If you see the number of ligands 6, what should be the shape? It should be octahedral. Then, if there are 4 ligands, now the question comes in 4 ligands. Okay, if it is strong ligand, then it is square planar, and if it is weak ligand, it is tetrahedral. It means based on the hybridization. If it is DsP2 in case of stronger ligands, it is square planar complex, and if it is sp3 in case of weak field ligands, the shape is tetrahedral. So these points should pop up in your mind whenever you see what, whether it is 6 ligands or 4 ligands. For 6 ligands, no question, it is octahedral. But in 4 ligands, should again see whether it is a strong ligandic complex or weak ligandic complex. Okay, if it's strong ligand, it is square planar. If it is weak ligand, it is tetrahedral. Now we'll discuss regarding the exceptions. Okay, I'll discuss one exception. Okay, next 3 exceptions are self-explanatory. It is, you can do first explanation, however I will give you according to the same explanation, the rest 3 also goes. Okay, that is, first is important is hexaamine chromium 3 plus. Okay, what is amine ligand here? It is nitrogen donor, so it should be a strong ligand complex. When you listen to the strong ligand, what are the things it should pop up? First, hybridization. What is the hybridization? It's 6 ligands present. So what is the hybridization? D2sp3, right? Then what should be the shape when it is 6 ligands? Octahedral. Okay, both are satisfied. But if the strong ligand is present, what should be the magnetism? It should be diamagnetic. But there is an exception. This complex shows paramagnetic property. Why it is, I'll explain. Okay, the oxidation state of chromium is 3 plus, so the number of electrons in the d orbital is 3. You know that there are 5 degenerate d orbitals. So if it is 3, 1 electron in the first orbital, second electron in the second orbital, third electron in the third orbital. For example, according to the postulate of VBT, if you think that because of the strong ligand present, the electrons get paired up. So if it pairs up, what happens here? The final electron will come in the first thing and it will get paired up. Still 1 electron is remaining. Then what happens when it gets paired up? There are 3 empty d orbitals. So what should the hybridization be? It should start from d3. We know that there is no hybridization which starts from d3. That's why to avoid that, what happens? The pairing does not take place. Okay, if there is pairing taking place, the hybridization is d3, which is impossible, right? So next hybridization which is possible is d2. That's why to avoid invalid hybridization, it will not pair up and all 3 electrons are not paired. That's why instead of diamagnetic, it shows paramagnetic property. Same thing in all these 3 complexes. It is D8. Okay, if it gets paired up, what happens here? It starts with D. There is no hybridization with D. That's why in order to avoid, instead of pairing, it will be singly filled. That's why it will be paramagnetic. Similarly here. Okay, after pairing also there is 1 extra electron. That's why it is paramagnetic. Similar in case of copper. So these 4 are the exceptions for the VBT. Okay, magnetic property explained by VBT. Because to satisfy the exact hybridization, what happens? The diamagnetic property is deviated and the molecule exhibits paramagnetic property. So this is regarding the VBT. So the valence bond theory I have simplified and given the main point, so that whenever you see the points, whatever question may be asked, you can easily answer the questions. So this is valence bond theory. So far we have discussed Werner's theory and valence bond theory. Next we'll go to crystal field theory. First we'll go crystal field theory in octahedral complexes. Okay, so if you see the octahedral complexes, this is the spatial arrangement. The central metal atom will be in the center and the 6 ligands will be occupied in the 6 different positions. You know that when you talk about d orbitals, you know that it is said to be a degenerate orbitals. Why? Because there are 5 d orbitals, that is dxy, dyz, dzx, dx square minus y square, and dz square. All these 5 orbitals having same energy. That's why it is said to be a degenerate orbitals. Okay, it is lying in the same energy level. But when the ligand approaches, okay, when coordination compound is formed, what happens? The ligand starts approaching what? The central metal atom. Okay, in octahedral complexes, the ligand approaches along the axis. Which are the two axes here? X axis and Y axis. You know that dxy, dyz and dzx lies in between the x and y axis, whereas dx square minus y square and dz square lies on the axis. So when the ligand starts approaching on the axis, what happens? These two orbital, that is dx square, y square, dz square, since it lies along the axis, it will observe maximum repulsion. Repulsion between what? The lobes of the ligands and the lobes of the central metal atom. So this will suffer maximum repulsion. So if suffers maximum repulsion means it will absorb maximum energy and get split to the higher energy level compared to that of average energy. This is the average energy level of degenerate orbitals. When the ligands approach due to the maximum repulsion, these two degenerate orbitals, it is x square minus y square and z square, will get shifted to the higher energy position, and that higher energy level is said to be the Eg level, where Eg level contains dx square minus y square and dz square orbital. Now, dxy, dyz and dzx will be in between the axis. But where does the ligand approach? It will approach along the axis. That's why these three will occur less repulsion between the lobe of the ligand and lobe of the metal atom. That's why what happens? It will come and settle to the lower energy, that is T2G level. So the d orbitals which were degenerate, which were in the same energy level, now they are split up into two different energy level. The higher Eg level consisting of two d orbitals, that is x square minus y square and z square, and three lower orbitals T2G level, it is x, y, y, z and zx. This splitting is said to be the crystal field splitting, and the difference in the Eg and T2G level is said to be the crystal field stabilization energy. Okay, crystal field stabilization energy. But if you see the diagram, I have written the difference in the average energy level and Eg level is more compared to that of average energy and T2G level. Why? Because this is dx square, y square and dz square. It is observing highest repulsion. That's why the difference in the energy level between the average energy level and the Eg level is more compared to that of T2G level and average energy level, and the difference in the energy is expressed either in delta naught or dq. Okay, if it is in terms of delta naught, it is 0.6 delta naught for average energy and Eg level, and 0.4 delta naught for T2G and average energy level. In terms of dq, it is 6 dq and 4 dq. Now, since there are two different set of energy levels, how to fill the electrons in these d orbitals? Before, what we used to do, we used to first singly fill d orbitals, then you have to pair the electrons. Now, if you are talking in terms of ligand, there are two types of ligand again, right? Strong ligands and weak ligands. Now, there are two conditions of filling, how to fill. Okay, in case of strong ligand, it's different filling. In case of weak ligand, it is different filling of electrons. First, in case of strong ligands, what happens in case of strong ligands? Okay, when the strong ligands approach the central metal atom, the difference in the energy delta naught is much greater than the pairing energy. Since it is much greater than the pairing energy, what happens? First, the electrons are completely filled in T2G level, then only it moves to the Eg level. Completely filling means what? Not only singly filling, you have to completely, in each dxy, dyz and dzx, two electrons should be filled. Then only you can move to the filling of Eg orbitals. That is, first you have to completely fill T2G orbitals, then you can fill Eg orbitals. Why? Because delta naught, the difference in the Eg and T2G level is much greater compared to that of pairing energy. That's why you have to completely pair T2G level first, then you can pair Eg level. Since the T2G level is always completely paired, what happens? There is no single spin. That's why it is said to be a low spin complex. So whenever the strong field ligands is there, if you want to fill T2G and Eg level, first you have to completely fill T2G level, then only you can go for Eg level. Next, in place of weak field ligands, what happens is the delta naught is less than P. That's why what happens, you can first singly fill T2G level, then singly fill Eg level, then you can come for pairing. Instead of completely filling one T2G level, then going for Eg, what you can do, first you can singly fill both T2G and Eg orbitals, then come and pair T2G. So this is the difference. See, if it is D6 here, in case of strong field, what happens? 1, 2, 3, then you have to again start pairing T2G, 4, 5, 6. Whereas in weak field ligand, first you will fill these 3, then go for Eg level, then come back and fill again T2G level. So this is the difference between the strong field ligand filling of T2G and Eg orbitals and weak field ligands filling of T2G and Eg orbitals. Since in weak field ligands there will be always single spin left out, it is said to be a high spin complex. So this is regarding the crystal field stabilization theory for the octahedral complex. Now the calculation. So according to the filling rules, here I have solved some of the numerals. For example, this is a cyano cobalt 3 minus. See here, cyanide is strong field ligand. So first what you have to do, you have to fill T2G level completely, then you have to go to Eg level. So the number of electrons in d orbital is 6. So all 6 ligands are first filled in T2G. So the configuration is T2G6, Eg 0. Similarly, in the next numerical, amine, again it is strong field ligand. So the d electron is 3. So first you have to fill T2G. So the configuration is T2G3, Eg 0. Next example, FeCN6 4 minus. Cyanide is a strong ligand, right? The configuration is D6. Instead of filling Eg, what you have to first fill? You have to fill all the T2G. So it will be T2G6, Eg 0. Similarly, we'll discuss weak field ligands. Example, nickel hexa aqua 2 plus. H2O is weak field ligands, right? No need of completely filling T2G orbital. So it is 8 electrons. How to fill first? T2G, 1, 2, 3. Then you have to go for 4th electron, you have to fill in Eg orbital, 4 and 5. Then come and fill 6th orbital again in T2G, 7th in T2G, 8th in T2G. So it will be T2G6, Eg2. T2G6 is not because first 6 electrons are filled in T2G level. It's not like that. 3 electrons, 2 electrons, then 5th electron again will be filled in T2G level. So its electronic configuration is T2G6, Eg2. Similarly, H2O6, it is 3D6. It will be T2G4, Eg2. How? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth again in T2G. So it will be T2G4, Eg2. What is the necessity? You may ask me, what is the necessity of splitting and writing the configuration? Because to calculate the CFSE formula, okay, the crystal field stabilization energy formula is given by minus 0.4x plus 0.6y delta naught, where this x and y stands for, x stands for number of electrons in T2G orbital and y stands for number of electrons in Eg orbital. So see, if you compare this, FeH2O6 2 plus, what is it? Is T2G4, Eg2. So what will be your formula? Minus 0.4, T2G it is 4 into 4. Sorry. Plus 0.6y. What is y? Number of electrons in Eg. It is 2. So it will become minus 0.4 into 4 plus 0.6 into 2. Whatever answer you will get, that is nothing but the crystal field stabilization energy for that particular complex. So that is for the octahedral complex. Similarly, I have solved an example here. Just go through the example. See, it is T2G3, Eg2. That's why in case of X, we have filled P, and in case of Y, I have filled 2. So it will cancel out and the crystal field stabilization energy is 0. It means it does not split. It is the same because there is no because H2O is a weaker ligand, so there is no effect of H2O on iron complex. Next, COCN6, it is T2G6 EG0. So minus 0.4 into 6 plus 0.6 into 0, it will give you minus 2.4. That is the crystal field stabilization energy, right? Then, now octahedral complex is done, right? Crystal field stabilization. Now, regarding tetrahedral complex, it is bit different. What I said to you in octahedral complex, always ligand approaches along the axis. But in tetrahedral complex, the ligand approaches the central metal atom in between the axis. So which are the d orbitals which is present in between? It is xy, yz and zx. That's why in tetrahedral complex, in presence of the ligand, these three orbitals, that is xy, yz and zx, suffer more repulsion. Hence, they will acquire a higher energy orbital, and that energy orbital is said to be a T2 orbital, not T2G. It is T2. T2 comes in square planar, whereas T2G comes in octahedral. Just remember it. I have seen students confusing. Okay, they will write reverse. For octahedral complex, everything it is asked, they'll write T2G. No, in square planar it is T2, and in octahedral it is T2G. Since they acquire maximum repulsion, they will acquire a higher energy state. Whereas x square minus y square z square, it is in the axis. Whereas the ligand approaches between the axis. That's why they suffer lower repulsion and acquire low energy state, that is x square minus y square and dz square state, and it is said to be E, not Eg, it is E. Okay, now the next question is how to fill the electron. Here it is strong ligand or weak ligand. The electron filling method is one and the same. That is, first you have to half fill E orbital, then half fill T2, then come back to E. It is same as filling in case of octahedral complexes, weak ligands. How do you fill? First you will fill T2G, then EG, then again come back to T2G. Similar way for the tetrahedral complex, it may be strong or weak ligand, the filling of electron is same. First you have to half fill E, then third electron should go to the T2 level, third, fourth, fifth, then come back to the sixth electron in the E level again. Okay, but the formula is bit different here. Okay, here instead of minus 0.4x, it is minus 0.6x plus 0.4y. Always remember the average energy, the difference between average energy and x square minus y square will be always greater compared to that of xy, yz and zx. Okay, that's why the formula is also minus 0.6x plus 0.5y. X stands for number of electrons in E level and Y stands for number of electrons in T2 level. Why? Because always delta T is less than P here. That's why in strong and weak ligands, both the electron filling method is one and the same. So I'll not discuss the problems because I have discussed the problem same way. Once you write the configuration, it is easy to substitute and find the crystal field stabilization energy. So this is regarding the crystal field stabilization energy of octahedral and square planar complexes. Last topic is remaining, the relation between the crystal field stabilization energy of octahedral and square planar complexes. Remember this formula, delta T stands for crystal field stabilization energy of square planar complex and delta naught stands for the crystal field stabilization energy of a weak complex. So delta T is equal to 4 by 9 delta naught. So if they give you delta T, you can find the delta naught data. If they give you delta naught, you can find the delta T data. Same problem here. So here delta naught is given. You have to find the delta T by substituting in the formula. So 18,000 is the delta naught value. How you will find the delta T? It is nothing but 8,000 centimeter inverse. So this is one more formula. It is asked in one's NET examination. So it may be asked in CET. You have to be prepared for the worst. Okay. So this formula also you have to remember with respect to CFSE tetrahedral and CFSE octahedral formulas. You have to remember the relation between tetrahedral and octahedral CFSE formulas. Okay. Next, how to find the effective atomic number? Most important question. Okay, you can see the question papers. The most important question are, one is IUPAC naming, one is effective atomic number. So every year there is one or the other question asked on effective atomic number. How to find effective atomic number given by Sidgwick's formula. So EAN is given by atomic number minus oxidation number plus 2 into coordination number. How do you find the oxidation number of the central metal atom? You know, how to find the coordination number based on the number of mode of ligand, right? Type of ligand present, you know. So once you know the atomic number in a complex, once you know the oxidation number of a central metal atom and the coordination number, you can easily find the EAN. For example, K4FeCN6. What is the atomic number of iron? It is 26 because iron is a central metal atom. What is the oxidation state? 4 plus X minus 6 is equal to 0. So X will be 2. What's the coordination number? Cn is monodentate ligand. So 6 Cn ligand. So coordination number is 6. So En will be 26 minus 2 plus 12. It will be 36. So according to the EAN rule, if the EAN of a complex is equal to 36, it will obey the EAN rule, or it will acquire the next noble gas configuration. The next noble gas configuration is either argon, neon, xenon. Those are the noble gases, right? So if EAN is equal to 36 means it can acquire the next stable gas configuration. That means if the EAN number is 36, it will obey EAN or the Sidgwick rule. Next is CuNH34SO4. What is the atomic number of copper? It's 29, right? Oxidation state, it is plus 2 because NH3 is 0, X minus 2 is equal to 0. So X is equal to plus 2. What is the coordination number? Ammonia is again a monodentate ligand. 4 ligands are there. So coordination number 4. So EN will be atomic number 29 minus the oxidation state 2 plus 8 is 35. So 35 is not equal to 36, right? So it will not obey EAN rule, or it cannot acquire next noble gas configuration. So this is nothing but the calculation of EAN. If they ask you, if they give you the complex and tell you to find EAN, first you have to find the atomic number of the complex, oxidation state, and coordination number. Sometimes I have seen in some papers, they have directly given the names. They have not given the formula. So first what you have to do, according to the IUPAC naming, you have to deduce the formula. Okay, you have to write the structural formula. Then from that, you can easily find out what the atomic number, coordination number, and what the oxidation number, and find the EAN of the complex. Just be careful. Both the ways the question can be asked. Okay. Next, the last topic. That is, when two compounds are given, how we will compare between the stability of the complexes. Okay, these three factors you have to keep it in mind. Whenever we see two complexes, when they are asking for which is more stable, 3 points should be in your mind. The first point, okay, in both the complexes, the same number of ligands will be present. Same central metal atom will be present. How will you differentiate between the stability? So according to the point, higher the charge of the central metal ion, okay, higher the charge on the central metal ion, greater is its stability. For example, K3FeCN6, K4FeCN6. So same number of ligands. Here also 6 cyanide ligands, 6 cyanide ligands. The central metal atom is also same, Fe. But in K3FeCN6, the oxidation state of Fe is plus 3. Okay. And in K4FeCN6, the oxidation state is plus 2. So which has more oxidation state? Plus 3 is the higher oxidation state. That's why according to the postulate, the one which carries higher oxidation state will be more stable. That's why K3FeCN6 is more stable compared to that of K4FeCN6. This is the first point. Okay, you should see whether the oxidation state is differing. Okay, if the oxidation state of the same metal is differing, then the one with the higher charge will be more stable compared to that of one with the lower charge. Second point. Now, the ligands itself are different. The first thing you have to see that what is the strength of the ligands? That means as the strength of the ligand increases, its stability increases. What do you mean by this point? The stronger ligand will be more stable compared to that of the complexes with the weaker ligand. You can see the example here. Both are copper complex, but the ligands are different. Here you have amine as a ligand. Here you have cyanide as a ligand. Both are strong ligands, no doubt. But which is more stronger? This is carbon donor. This is nitrogen donor. So carbon donor is more stronger than the nitrogen donor. So what? Tetracyanocopper complex, it is more stable compared to that of tetraamine copper complex. Why? Because carbon donor ligand is more strong compared to that of amine ligand. So as the strength of the ligand increases, its stability increases. Next, chelating ligand form more stable compounds. See the example here, NiEN twice. En is the diamine. It is chelating ligand. It will form cyclic complex, right? Whereas amine, it's monodentate. It does not form chelating ligands. Okay, it does not form cyclic complexes. So since En forms, see, both are nickel complexes. The ligand also are the same family. It is nitrogen donor itself. But since it is a chelating ligand, what happens? This is more stronger compared to that of tetraamine nickel 2 plus complex, because the cycle forming ligands or the chelate forming ligands are way beyond stronger compared to that of normal monodentate ligands. So these 3 points should come into a picture whenever they give you, they try to ask you the question regarding the compare the stability between the 2 or 3 complexes. First you have to see if there is same ligand, then you have to consider the charge as the point. Okay, if there are different ligands, you have to see the strength of the ligands. If there are same metal, different ligands, if you can see this, even different ligands, it's not comparable, then you have to see which forms chelating ligands and which forms not. Okay, if these 3 points are in your mind, you can easily say whether the complex is stable or not. And one more last question I have given you. This was an interesting question I was found in one of the NEET papers. Okay, now to see this point here, stronger the ligand, it absorbs more energy. Okay, as the strength of the ligand increases, that means as you move from halogen donor ligands to carbon donor ligands, what happens? Its strength increases. As the strength of the ligand increases, it absorbs, since the strength is more, it absorbs more and more energy. You know that the energy and wavelength relation, right? Energy is inversely proportional to wavelength. It means if an atom is absorbing a higher energy, means it is absorbing lower wavelength. So all these 3 you can combine and write it as stronger the ligand, more is the energy, but less is the wavelength. It means as the strength of the ligand increases, the strength of its wavelength decreases. So if you write the decreasing order of the ligand, it means it is nothing but the increasing order of the wavelength. The question is asked here, correct increasing order for the wavelength of absorption in the visible region of the complexes. So 3 complexes given of cobalt with 3 different ligands. One is water, one is En, one is NH3. First, write in terms of strength of the ligand, which is more stronger. Okay, En. When you compare nitrogen and oxygen, nitrogen is way stronger. When you compare En and NH3, since En is chelating, En is more stronger. So according to the strength of the ligand, the strongest one is En, followed by NH3, followed by aqua. But the question is asked increasing order of the wavelength. We have written the decreasing order of the ligand strength. It is nothing but the increasing order of the wavelength. Since En is the stronger ligand, it is less absorbing wavelength. So the least wavelength will be En, followed by NH3, followed by H2O. So the first correct answer is D, that is COEN thrice is the least wavelength absorbing compound. CONH3 is the next. Next is aqua. If they have asked you in terms of energy, B will be the answer because it will be in the order of the strength of the ligand. So this is also one of the question I found it interesting. So this is the end of your video lecture. I have covered Werner's theory. I have covered valence bond theory. I have covered crystal field theory for octahedral and tetrahedral, how to find effective atomic number and factors affecting the stability of the complex. So if you just go through video 1 and video 2, it is far enough to crack all the questions of the coordination compounds chapter. Thank you for listening.